Dear learners, welcome back to the world of mass communication and particularly the topic of background research today. Uh, why is it important and what is background research? Off and on, in your private life or even your social life, time to time, you might have heard some controversies about films, books, TV serials, or other stories where it is alleged there might be some complaints that the film has not shown the story in a proper sense. The book was not written with proper historical research or facts, or some television serials, news items, news features, etc. were not written with a proper depiction of history or the background events which have led to the current situation. Now, why these controversies do erupt, or why these controversies do emerge or come up from time to time? There are several factors. One of them, the most important one, is that many a times we do not give proper emphasis on checking the facts and figures as well as the historical development of one particular phenomenon or development. For example, if I would like to make a film based on, if I would like to make a film on a historical character, historical event. For example, if it is if I am going to make a serial or historical film on Azad Hind Force or Gandhi's Dandi March, Bardoli Satyagraha, etc., then I will have to look at many of the things, all the things which were prevalent in those periods of time. For example, one is what were the costumes, what were the clothes, kind of clothes people used to wear during those days, what was the proper historical sequence, where from Gandhiji went to which place, then which were the exact spots where the Satyagraha was held or the Azad Hind Force people were fighting against the Japanese forces, etc. And only then we will be able to make an authentic picture or authentic media content out of all those events or our interests. Again, even if we want to make a story, if we want to make a serial, or if we want to make a feature on historical or real-time current developments, let's take an example of maybe the immigrants problem in India, or illiteracy. Now, if we have to speak about the illiteracy problem, then today illiteracy is a major issue in many of the countries. In our country, according to the 2011 census, the literacy rate is 75%. That is somebody who can read or write or just make their signatures. But the actual literacy rate will be slightly less. Now, if we have to make a feature or if we have to make an in-depth story about how literacy has developed over the years, then we will have to go back to history when to the time when formal schools were set up by the earlier administration, and before that, what was the system of education in our country for the mass people or the youths. Then gradually we will have to come to the establishment of universities, colleges, then other mass literacy programs, etc. That is background research. What efforts were taken up, or what were the phenomenon developments which have taken place in those places, in those times, and which have led to the current situation in what way, what manner, etc. Again, let us take the example of immigrants. Today, immigrants' problem is a major problem all over the world, not necessarily in our own country. Every country, almost all the countries of the world are affected by the immigrants' problem, and which has been there for many, in fact, several hundreds of years, right from the beginning of our history. Now, what is the story of immigration? How immigration has started in the very preliminary days. Then what is the situation of internal migration and immigration, cross-border migration, etc. All these things will have to be consulted or will have to be checked or read by the journalist or the media person who would like to make a program out of it. The program, we mean media contents, which may include a news item, a feature, then a program for radio, TV, etc., or even a film or a book based on any issue. Okay. So that is why background research is so important. Then you may notice this right up here, this line here, that public memory is short. So we need references. Now, let us take the example of a legal issue. As you know, the very long time which are needed to settle our legal cases in our country has been a cause of concern for the judiciary fraternity for a long time. Even the judges from the Supreme Court, High Court, everyone is concerned about it, that many of the cases take 20 years, 30 years, even 15 years for being settled. And many of the accused but not found guilty people are perishing in our judicial custody for want of, for not being able to be, for the cases not being settled on time. A lot of precious time is lost in the process. Now, if a case was filed in one of the courts 10 years, 5 years, 20 years back, suppose an important verdict has been given, the final verdict has been delivered recently. Now, if we say that the final verdict in the so-and-so case has been delivered by Supreme Court or lower courts or High Court is so-and-so, the people, the accused have been found guilty or maybe not found guilty. Now, how will the people, the average reader like you or me, will be able to understand the context of that case? There you have to give a reference to the background that this was the case for which the issue was going on in the courts for such a long time and what has happened in between. That is why background research is so important. It is not necessarily for only journalism, it is for all the avenues of mass media, that is books, cinema, any media which may be coming up in future. So in one way it is some amount of cross-checking is very much important. Okay. Now in case of developing stories, this is very important. For example, as I have said, during our independence time of independence, how many schools, colleges, educational institutions might have been there, and what was the literacy rate? Now, if we look at the literacy rate or the number of institutions which have been set up during the last 75 years or so of our independent status, then we will need to look at the background, how we have come to this current situation. Then again, many of you might be knowing that from time to time, many ethnic communities or even many communities which are supposed to be developed than other communities, compared to other communities, make a demand that they be converted into a certain reserved category community. Now, in those cases, background research becomes very important. What will be done in the background research under such circumstances? That is, the journalist or the media persons will go and look into the evolution or development of that community over the years. How the community came to be established, what has been the developmental status, how over the years, whether they have faced discrimination or not, or what is the educational status of the people in general of that community, then where are they located. There are some communities who might be located in different places of the country. And there are some communities which might be located only a very few pockets which will be their stronghold. Now, if the people from the same community, if they are in one state, they are getting a certain kind of privilege, social privilege or constitutional privilege. If whether the people of the same community living in another state or in another region will get the same constitutional rights or not. All these things require an in-depth background research for arriving at a proper conclusion and giving people the right reference to the context about any developmental issue, any issue for that matter. Now, many times, many of the issues are long forgotten. For example, suppose a community or a state or region may make a demand that we would like to have a separate state, or we would like to be included in we would like to have sixth schedule privileges in our area, then we would like to have an autonomous council in our area. But somehow or other, that demand that demand may have been lying idle and not heard of for a long time. Say, then after 50 years, if after 50 years, suddenly the same demand comes up, then it is the activity of background research which will be able to find out why the demand has come up and what is the feasibility or what is the practical aspect of that demand. You may know that the Telangana state came into existence some years back. You know, the Telangana State Demand Committee was there for a very long time, several decades ago. But for over around 3 decades or so, it remained not very active. But suddenly, in the last decade, it became active, and finally, the Telangana state was carved out of Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. And that is the now, if I have to write about the development and evolution of the Telangana state, then I or anyone, any journalist or media person will have to go back to the roots, how the demand came up and how the demand was not heeded to, or how the negotiations were going on here and there, and who will be the people included in that area, in that state, etc. That is background research. It is very important for any mass media so that we can give a very authentic and perfect story or media content to the people under any circumstance. I have already told you that historical importance is very important. Historical facts should be very proper and without any aberration or mistake. And then a strong background or the basics will make your story more convincing. Whether it is a book, whether it is a cinema, whether it is a film, whether it is a news item, whether it is a feature, anywhere. A strong basic development or basic idea about it based on facts and figures will make your story much more convincing and stronger than anything else. And again, I have said the public memory is short, so we need to give a reference to the context under many circumstances. Now, in many of the films, television serials, or other electronic media programs, or even in newspapers, many a times, you may have found in the credits who have done who have carried out what kind of role in that particular program. You may have found this topic, not topic, now you may have found this activity also, that research, this is the team for research who have done the research for that particular program, cinema, serial, book, etc. Now, this is background research. Okay, now, for example, recently, Yep. We make lot of mistakes many a times, as I have said, because we do not give proper importance on many of the aspects of, while preparing or producing our media contents. Very recently, I have read an interview of a very prominent costume designer for films. She's quite experienced. She has said that costumes play a very important role in audiovisual programs, especially visual programs. I mean, now you might be aware, some of you might be aware that the Gandhi cinema, the film Gandhi by Richard Attenborough has won 7 or 8 Oscars. One of the Oscars of that movie was specially for the costumes of that film. And Bhanu Athaya was the costume designer. Now, you see how important it is. Costume design is also an aspect of background research when you are making a media content. Okay. For different kinds of media contents, it may take, background research may take different aspects, different forms, or different ways. Now, suppose we are having polls. Early next year, Assam will be going to the polls for the state assembly elections. Now, you may have heard about a particular term called psephological study or psephology. Psephology. Psephology is the study of elections, poll predictions, etc. Now, it is when elections come, a lot of people are interested in what might be the outcome, how the media is forecasting winning or losing of the people or parties. There, the psephological studies become very important. And to do psephological studies, what you have to do is you have to find out the earlier election patterns, the way how people have voted for a particular party, or whether they have voted for a particular candidate, whether candidate was more important than the party or the party was more important than the candidate, and if there is any tendency of the candidates winning uncontested, as they might be having no other contestants against them. If that happens, how many times it has happened, and what are the trends, etc. So that will be a very background research for your study. In this regard, you have to, there is no alternative rather than going for a background research to do a proper and a very convincing psephological study. On the basis of those, you can predict with a well-founded justification that if we look at this statistical information or these trends of information which have been reflected in the earlier polls or elections for either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha or even state assembly elections, and based on these things, we can predict that in the coming polls, this kind of voting pattern is going to be reflected. Okay. Then again, after the votes are cast, voting is done. The exit polls or other kinds of polls approaching people, that is also a kind of background research, because you are asking people for their preference in the voting behavior, how they have voted. So that way you are also doing a research. Then again, never take any claim or any news item by any organization or any individual. He or she might be a political leader, he or she might be a government official, he or she might be a office bearer of a non-governmental organization or any organization. Never take anything at face value. So taking face value, what is meant by taking something at face value? That means whatever somebody might have said about, or somebody might have claimed about anything, never take it for granted. Never believe in what the person has said, unless you have a very long-standing relationship with that person or the organization as a source. Because many a times, you need to verify what is being said by anybody. There are many journalists or many media organizations, media persons, when they have to prepare, when they have to produce a particular media content, whether it is a film, book, or it is a news item, they will, after picking up the topic on what they will make that media content, that particular kind of media content, they will go to relevant places, fields, archives, and scout for information. Scouting for information means look for information from all possible sources. In one of the previous lectures, we have discussed that nowadays it has become much more convenient because of the internet as well as websites. Most of the prestigious organizations which have some amount of prestige at least, or some amount of standing, will indefinitely have a website. And in the website, the basic results will be, a basic information about that organization will always be there. And many times nowadays, important people or anyone for that matter, they will also have a website of their own. For example, I may also have a website of my own, and I can keep my articles, publications, photographs, or samples of works which I do in that website so that people can access it. Maybe for a fees, or maybe it might be for a free. So that is why looking for background information has become somewhat convenient and easier, but at least some amount of footwork or groundwork you have to carry out. You must have heard about P. Sainath, who was for a very long time rural affairs editor of The Hindu. And he's a very prominent expert in this kind of developments. What he used to do was, you know that the governments have, state governments or central governments always have a lot of schemes for people's development. And because of corruption as well as because of lack of foresight while implementing things, many a times these schemes do not deliver the results which are desired actually, desired. So whenever P. Sainath would pick up a certain theme to research upon, or to a theme to write about or write upon, he would select a particular place which should be considered as the most underdeveloped place or most backward place, and go to that place or village and stay there for several days. And from ground zero, he or she will try to find out what is actually happening despite the claims of the government or any other organization. And many a times it was found that there was a very big gap between what was claimed by the government or the organization or what was actually happening on the ground realities. That is why background research is very important. Whenever you decide on doing a particular story, whether it may be a feature, it may be a news story, it may be a film, TV serial, etc., always insist on a ground visit as far as possible. It may not always be possible, of course. Then you have to rely upon your sources which are close enough and which are reliable. Sources have to be reliable. I am emphasizing again and again. So you don't have to write that reliable sources. But if you use your sources for more than 2-3 times, then you will come to know whether how much they are reliable or how much they are actually practical. Okay. Based upon that, you will have to decide whether you will continue your relationship with one particular source or not. And based on your tips or hints, you will have to make a ground visit so that you can come to know what is actually happening on the ground. And then you give the real picture. Many times, as I have spoken about the credits of research in cinema, serials, etc., it is written that this team or this person is responsible for the research for our program. Now, many a times, we do not do research properly, or maybe we are not serious enough in producing a kind of media contents for which a lot of problems occur. about a month back, our department has invited one very prominent person who was the ex-Director General of the State Police Department. So while we were having a talk with the student, he said that many a times background research has created problem. Lack of proper background research was a major issue. The person said that many a times in many commercial programs, it is shown that the police person will be designated as a commissioner or say superintendent of police or senior, very senior level official, but it will be shown that on his epaulette here, there will be only 2 stars or 3 stars or so on. But actually, for a person above the rank of commissioner and deputy superintendent of police, the symbol is actually not only stars, it is different. It's a mixture of stars as well as some other symbols. Sometimes the Ashok Stambha as well as one dagger kind of thing, etc. And from Inspector General onwards or Deputy Inspector General onwards, or in Army Major General onwards, there will be a slight sign here, this type of a epaulette will be here on the lapel. Okay, so if you were making a program, if you are making producing a cinema or TV serial based on such issues or stories, these details should be given a lot of prominence. I have even heard that there was a very prominent actor, I won't take the name here because it will lead to free publicity. There's a very prominent actor in Indian cinema. He had done a very important role in a commercial cinema, of course, commercial film which I have seen about 10 years back. In that film, the character was supposed to have been shown, the character which was supposed to have been played by this person was depicted as a person who is about to retire. Say, for example, he might be around 57, 58 years of age. Okay. Now, under those circumstances, the person, the hero, the person who was wearing, he was a police officer, a very senior police officer about to retire. Say 2-3 years for retirement. Now, he was supposed to have been wearing a kind of uniform, pair of uniforms, which were also expected to look quite older, not very chic or say some kind of very new uniform which must have been stitched only just a few days back. It must not look like that. The story demanded that the uniform should look like that it has been worn for almost 2-3 years. Now, then one of the art directors as well as the costume designers came up with a very novel idea. They said that they have prepared the uniform, 2 or 3 pairs of uniform for that person, for the officer character, and they washed it hand washed the uniform pairs for almost 1 month regularly when the shooting was yet to start. Before the shooting has started, for almost 1 month, every day. It was not dirty also because it was not worn at least. It was not worn by the person. But for washing it every day for almost 1 month without any break, it has become somewhat worn out and it has given a look that it was almost 1 year or 1.5 years older. So that is the kind of details which people give importance to when making a media content for any of the mass media, always. So their background research is very important. Many of the historical movies, you have to know how the people behaved or how people dressed, what kind of food they would eat those days. Similarly, while cross-checking things, there also background research is very important. You have to know where to look for information. And again, as I have said, because of development of internet and websites, it has become quite convenient for looking at information. But many of the information you won't get in the websites or in the internet platforms. You will have to look for hard copies in libraries, archives, etc. There is most of the state governments, and I think in fact the central government will also be having it. There is a department called State Archives, Department of State Archives. Once I have visited the Department of Archives, the Central Archive of the Government of Assam in Guwahati, with one of my friends for some stories. There I was very surprised that very old books, write-ups, notices were there, which date back even to the time of the kings when they were in the throne power, till the last time they were in power. And even when the British people have taken over the country, and even Assam after the Yandabu Treaty, some of the documents were there even from those days. They become almost worn out. It's very difficult to touch them because they will become destroyed. I mean, if you touch it, it will break, the page will break or so, but they are there. Now, if needed, if I have to write something about the historical development of Assam, or historical or political development of Assam, then I will need to go to those archives. And it is very difficult to even make photocopies or even take photographs of them because they are in a very bad shape. Obviously, they will be in a bad shape because they might be almost 150 years or 200 years or even more than 200 years old. Okay, so background research is so important for anything. Now, one thing I would like to tell that the India census, which carries out the census of the entire population of the country, has become much more better nowadays since the last two censuses, say census 2001 and census 2011, because in addition to the census of the people, both the last two censuses, they are also making a census or making a survey of what are the various other aspects. For example, I have seen the last two census reports that there they have made a survey of the people, what kind of houses people do live in, whether it is a pokka house of concrete or whether it is a tin roofed house or whether it is a bamboo house, etc. And then again, what are the food habits, or even not food habits, what are the water sources, what is the mode of transport people do possess. Say maybe if a family has a cycle or a bus or a car or a truck or tractor, etc. Then as I am from the world of media, my interest was attracted by one particular aspect in which I have found that both the census have taken note of what are the modes of media, mass media, and means of communication used by the people. Right? There, this trend was started from the first time in the 2001 census, and then it was continued even in for the 2011 census, and I think it will continue for the next successive censuses. This is a very good trend. Now, if I have to do a story about how many people of the country possessed television sets in each state, and even I think I did not go look at it, but most probably district level data will also be there. But I looked at the state level data. How many people, how many households will be having a television set or a transistor set or internet connections? All these aspects are there. So If we can give some amount of information and data from those sources, that will add to the authenticity of your story and the convincingness of your story, and the story will be enriched to a very big extent. Okay, and as the Census of India is a very authentic Government of India source, you don't, I mean, nobody can, if you correct it, quote it, if you put the things properly, if you use the data properly, without any mistakes or incorrectly, then nobody can dispute you that you are using data which are not adequate or which are not authentic. So you see, this is basically what is background research, and doing background research like collection of information is also very important. It may destroy or it may succeed your story in a very big way. Okay. For example, sometimes you will suddenly find that there are some developments coming up here and there which are unrelated. For example, maybe in Assam, one person may have died of some particular disease, and a similar kind of death was reported from another place at a very distant region, in the same country, same state, or maybe in another state. Then, if there are 3-4 such developments or phenomenon which keep coming, then you should take a note and try to find out if there is one common disease or common problem for which all these people have died, and why is it happening. Okay. For example, many a times we do features about how social social relationships or political developments are changing, and how the topography or geographic or environmental issues are changing. Climate change, yeah, climate change will be a very prominent and adequate issue here. Let me tell you one personal anecdote. I was brought up in a place nearby Dibrugarh and in Assam, and that is why for many times we have, for different works with my father or some family works also, we had to go to the Dibrugarh town quite often. And it was a very nice way of spending time just by sitting by the banks of the Brahmaputra. And while I was young in the 1980s, those days, it was very common, quite common to see dolphins, river dolphins jumping up here and there. If you would be sitting there for 10 minutes or half an hour, at least 10 or 20 dolphins jumping, in those waters, you will definitely see. Now, when I was working in Dibrugarh All India Radio in 2001 and 2, then one day when I went, several days in fact, when I went to the Brahmaputra bank to see expecting to see those dolphins, I could hardly find anyone. Some people said that, local people said that they are there, but not like the earlier days. Now, if I have to make a story about the dolphins, there can be different kinds of angles. One can be, say, I have seen dolphins, or there will be many people who have seen such good number of dolphins in those days and very less number of dolphins now. That can be one story. That why then, if we have to do a story like that on that angle, then we will have to find out why the dolphins have come down. What has happened which has caused the number of dolphins to be reduced to such a low extent. Then we will have to talk to experts in that regard, and the climate change or geographical changes in the flow of the waters, siltation, etc., everything. And how the loss of habitat, if there was any problem because of food or the accommodation of those dolphins have happened.